I believe the Attorney General of New York is going to get charged by the feds here criminally. I think this is going to be a big deal. I think it is a case that is being undercovered right now, even in the right-wing media. I've been surprised that this hasn't gotten more attention.
They're claiming that I engaged in mortgage fraud, that I somehow decided that I was a resident of Virginia, which would be some commute every morning to the office at 28 Liberty. That somehow, I should be held to the same standard as Donald Trump, but somehow what I did was basically similar to what Donald Trump engaged in. And there's just no comparison. The allegations against me are totally baseless.
Flashback.
The agency also alleges that James, in numerous documents, misrepresented a building she bought in Brooklyn, saying it only had 4 units instead of 5. And they allege that James purchased another property with her father as a co-signer, but falsely listed the pair as husband and wife in 1983 and 2000.
So Tish James has responded to the allegations. Let's see how she explains all this. Now, here's a message from our sponsor, Hillsdale College. History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study any of these things in school? Probably not. Or even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed the game, but it hasn't changed the basics, the fundamental truths about the world we live in. Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, more than 40 free online courses. I'm digging into their Constitution 101 right now, and it's a game changer. 12 self-paced lectures that show you how the founders designed our government, how Lincoln kept the Union together during the Civil War, and how things like progressivism and big government have chipped away at our fundamental rights. For instance, like free speech on the internet. Now, as you know, I do a lot of stories on public corruption. And if you want to understand why today's corruption stories are even possible, and more importantly, how to stop them, this course is your blueprint. Now go to hillsdale.edu/Nate to enroll. There is no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/Nate to register. Link is in the description and in the pinned comments. So go learn about your rights so you can defend your freedom. Now back to the madness. All right, this is New York Attorney General Tish James, and by law, she must live in the state of New York. And if you think about it, it just makes sense. If you're the Attorney General of a state, you should reside in that state. Now, while running for Attorney General, Tish James ran on a platform of, I'm going to get Trump by any means necessary.
America is an uncharted territory. We are angrier and more deeply divided than we've ever been at any point in our history since the Civil War. And at the eye of the storm is Donald Trump, ripping families apart, threatening women's most basic rights, and running for Attorney General because I will never be afraid to challenge this illegitimate president. I believe that this president is incompetent. I believe that this president is ill-equipped to serve in the highest office of this land. And I believe that he is an embarrassment to all that we stand for. He should be charged with obstructing justice. I believe that the President of these United States can be indicted for criminal offenses, and we would join with law enforcement and other attorneys general across this nation in removing this president from office. In addition to that, the Office of Attorney General will continue to follow the money because we believe that he's engaged in a pattern and practice of money laundering the money from foreign governments here in New York State, and particularly related to his real estate holdings. It's important that everyone understand that the days of Donald Trump are coming to an end.
So as you see, she made it clear, you vote for me, you put me in office, I'm going after Trump. Now, fast forward, she got elected into office and she did exactly what she said she was going to do. She said, if I get elected, I'm going after Trump and going to find something against him. And she did. And she won a civil judgment worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lana Zach, and we are following breaking news from New York City. The largest judgment to date has been issued against former President Donald Trump. Judge Engoron has imposed a penalty of more than $350 million against Donald Trump his adult sons, and his corporation in the civil fraud case brought by New York Attorney General Letitia James. Well, the former president is being ordered to pay more than $354 million in damages. His co-defendants are being ordered to pay another $10 million in fines. The judge has also banned the former president from conducting business in the state of New York over the next 3 years. Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr. are also prevented from serving as an officer or director of any New York corporation for the next 2 years.
Now, the case against Donald Trump was simple. He owns a building, and in one instance, he tells the government that building is worth, let's say, $100 million. That's so he can pay lower taxes on it. Then, when he wants to get a loan from a bank, that same building he'll say is worth $200 million, and that would get him more favorable loan rates. And the Attorney General of New York says that Trump's, quote, exaggeration on those forms to get those favorable loan rates was unlawful.
So his investigation, he exaggerated. Let me emphasize that. Exaggerated the value of his assets to the tune of millions and millions, and was able to secure favorable insurance and interest rates.
Now, this is exactly what the federal government is claiming that Tish James did when she bought some property in Virginia. And just so you know, I'm pulling all of this from the April 14, 2025 criminal referral. This was sent to the U.S. Justice Department from the Federal Housing Finance Agency. Ms. James, for both properties listed above, appears to have falsified records in order to meet certain lending requirements to receive favorable loan terms. Now, in this document, the federal government is alleging that Letitia James committed a specific type of mortgage fraud, known as occupancy fraud.
I wanted to do a video about occupancy fraud because it's the number one fraud in the mortgage industry. This means people will say that they're going to live in a home so they can get the primary residence interest rate, which is much lower than the investment property interest rate. But really their intention is to rent it out. Also, on a primary residence, you can get that loan with a much smaller down payment, sometimes as little as 5% down, whereas on a rental property, you need 20% down or more. So people will, shocker, lie, and that's a fraud, and that's a big deal. This is what underwriting is for. Our underwriters, everybody's underwriters are looking for any kind of fraud. And it's enough that it's the number one fraud in the industry, and it's enough that it's something that it's always looked for.
Now, the government shows some exhibits to prove its case. First, this specific power of attorney signed on the 17th day of August 2023 by Letitia James. And to make sure this was Letitia James, this was notarized with 2 witnesses. And this document states, quote, "I hereby declare that I intend to occupy this property as my principal residence." What property are we talking about? We're talking about the purchase of the property known as 604 Sterling, Norfolk, Virginia, 23505. Then the government provides Exhibit B, which is the deed of trust. Now, when you look at page 6 of 11, it defines what occupancy means.
6 of the deed of trust deals with occupancy. And here's what you're actually committing to. Borrower shall occupy, establish, and use the property as the borrower's principal residence within 60 days after execution of this security instrument, and shall continue to occupy the property as borrower's principal residence for at least 1 year after the date of occupancy. And then here's the crucial part. Unless lender otherwise agrees in writing, which consent shall not be unreasonably withheld, or unless extenuating circumstances exist which are beyond the borrower's control.
Now, the criminal referral sums it up this way. At the time of the 2023 Norfolk, Virginia property purchase and mortgage, Ms. James was sitting Attorney General of the state of New York and is required by law to have her primary residence in the state of New York. Even though her mortgage application lists her intent to have the Norfolk, Virginia property as her primary home, it appears Ms. James' property and mortgage-related misrepresentations may have continued to her recent 2023 Norfolk, Virginia property purchase in order to secure lower interest rate and more favorable loan terms. Now, just to be clear, Letitia James concedes that this property in Virginia is not her primary residence and never has been.
The key allegation, again, it sounds like you don't want to address them here, but I'm just going to put it out so people understand that a property that was owned in Virginia, a mortgage that you signed, if I'm not mistaken, for that property, that they say you falsely represented yourself as a resident of Virginia, and that was essentially amounts to mortgage fraud since you're a resident of New York. What is your response to that?
It's baseless. Everybody knows I'm a resident of New York, specifically Brooklyn. And again, we will respond at the appropriate time in the appropriate way to these baseless allegations. And some media outlets like the Daily News over the weekend has indicated as much.
That's all you want to say?
That's all that I'm going to say.
Now, Letitia James' attorney also wrote a letter to the DOJ responding to the mortgage fraud allegations. In that letter, she does say here that it was mistakenly stated that the property would be Miss James' principal residence. She also goes on that she made a, quote, very clear in all caps statement 2 weeks earlier to the mortgage loan broker that, quote, this property will not be my primary residence. And she attached the email and the Section 5 declaration where it says, will you occupy the property as your primary residence? And it's checked no. She also attached another email from the day before where she asked the loan broker straight out, where's the form that indicates this property is not my primary residence? I cannot find it. Now, if these documents are to be believed, it shows that her intent was not to list the Virginia residence as her primary residence. Now, where does this leave us? Well, for the government to sustain charges of criminal mortgage fraud, the government must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Letitia James knowingly made false statements to induce a financial institution to lend her this money. Now, obviously, the government is going to show the sworn documents with two witnesses where she signed saying that she intended this property to be her primary residence as proof that she intentionally tried to induce the financial institution to lend her money at favorable rates. In a vacuum, this would be enough of probable cause to even bring charges. But when looking at the full context, you do have these other declarations that clearly show that Letitia James made it very clear that she didn't want to even make it seem that she lived in the property in Virginia. Quote, will you occupy the property as your primary residence? She checked no. Then she even sent an email to the loan broker who was putting together the paperwork to also say, where's the form that indicates that property is not my primary residence? I can't find it. Now remember, the government's burden here is beyond a reasonable doubt, and you have to demonstrate that this was willful misconduct. Now, based on all the available evidence, this is easily looking like a mistake. Now, why is that important? Because if this is generally just a mistake where you have all these conflicting documents, then you will not be able to prove the willful misconduct piece of it, and she would not be able to be convicted. Honestly, it's going to be hard to even charge her with all of this conflicting evidence. So at the end of the day, are these charges baseless, as Letitia James keeps saying?
I will respond to these baseless allegations at the appropriate time and in the appropriate way, but I am 100% confident that it will not result in any criminal indictment or action against me.
Now, obviously, they're not baseless because you do have a document that she signed with two witnesses in front of a notary that essentially says, I will be a primary resident of Virginia. So that makes the case not baseless. But to get a criminal conviction, you do need more. You need that willful act. And this paper isn't enough on its own, especially in the full context of all the other communications with the loan broker. This will not be an easy conviction. Matter of fact, it will not even be easy to bring charges in this particular context. So let me know how you feel about this whole thing in the comments section. Some people want Letitia James to be fried on the skillet because what she did to Trump. Other people are going to defend her no matter what. But as we always have learned, especially with this channel, the law is more complicated than what it seems. In one instance, you do have these documents that look very damning, but in the full context of it, it starts getting a lot more money. And that's why the law is what it is. Now, if you like this type of content, don't forget, like, share, subscribe, do all that great YouTube stuff. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and these are the facts. Don't let anybody fool you. Peace.